And we're back.
And we're back.
Oh, man.
Welcome to the Avink and Leather podcast. I'm your host, Vily Kolesnichenko.
And I'm your host, Mark Schlahovsky.
And joining us today on today's episode is a special guest named Liya Semenenko, who you may recognize as our most recent giveaway grand prize winner, our actually very first giveaway that we've ever done, and our only giveaway thus far.
Thus far.
Yeah, thank you. It was actually the first giveaway I ever won on Instagram. So I'm very excited to be here joining you guys on this episode today and for your discussion. So thank you for having me. It's a privilege and
it's an honor.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, she lives in Pittsburgh, so we didn't have to fly her out from another state or something like that.
Although we could have.
Yeah, we could have. We could have. And that's something that's a viable option. But now we have Zoom, which most of you are familiar with the quarantine now.
Yeah. We would have made arrangements, but once again, coincidentally, Liya, you're here.
Yeah.
And we have the honor of having our friend speak today with us.
Yes.
The honor is mine.
So, Liya, we have a question for you today. We're just going to dive straight in.
Right.
What did you bring to the table?
Okay, so what I brought to the table,
Did you prepare?
I brought this jar.
Nice.
Right
It's a
here.
cookie jar, but it's not full of cookies.
Looks like scraps from your tax records.
Yeah, she's been shredding tax records, guys. I
She's
don't know,
like,
man.
no, man.
Shady.
What we got here?
What are these? Oh,
Do you want to
interesting.
explain to us what you brought?
Slivers of a recipe book?
This is not a cookie jar.
Love
All-
letters that you cut up?
Yeah, all very, very good guesses. Almost there, but this is actually a collection of different wise proverbs and sayings from different countries and like different wise people. And I even keep one as a bookmark. And one of my favorite French proverbs: "Patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet," which I got from there.
I love it.
Oh.
Wow.
Thought
Very
it
nice.
tied in with our topic today.
I think it does.
Very
Okay.
well.
Well, then, Mark, on to you. What did you bring to the podcast today?
It's
What
getting
did you
a
bring
little-
to the table?
It's getting a little sunny out.
I think the light has been getting brighter.
it's getting a little bit too bright.
Too bright?
So I decided to bring sunglasses to the table today. Because sometimes the sun is a little bit too bright.
I see.
So leave in the comments why you think I brought sunglasses to the table today.
Yeah.
And
We'd love to see your guess.
yes. Really? So me and Liya brought something. What did you bring to the table?
Obviously, my iPad. I'm just kidding.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
I brought something completely different. I brought a whole vault. I brought a safe.
Where is it?
Look behind you. It's behind this wall, actually.
I don't see it.
It's hiding back there. I'm just kidding. It's right here.
Oh! Wow, it's a thing.
Yeah,
it's a safe.
It's a thing. It's a safe.
You want me to hold it?
It's very secure. You can try to open it.
Wow.
Looks a
I
little
don't know.
I think
rusty.
we need a key. Is there like a map to a key or something? Is there like a treasure
Is there
inside?
is there
There's a
treasure here?
treasure inside. Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like
Valuables
valuables.
in there. Or I just put
It's very rusty.
poetry or something that I wrote, or songs that are cringy, or journal entries
your
that I
journals.
ripped out of my notebook and,
Yeah.
and wanted to hide from the rest of the world. Yeah, that's what's in there.
Nobody has access to that.
Nope, nobody but the person who has a key, or a very, very hot
Or
flame
anything
torch.
sharp.
Yeah.
Anything sharp will do.
Yeah. But you may be wondering then, how do these three things, how do shredded taxes, sunglasses, and a safe tie into our conversation? Well, that's a very good question, and we're going to answer that today. Our topic that we're going to be discussing today is wisdom, and we're going to be answering the question, what is wisdom, from a couple of different perspectives. We will be diving into the biblical perspective of wisdom, taking a look at godly wisdom, taking a look at, human wisdom, and just diving straight in. So,
Yep.
question number one, what is wisdom?
Yeah. So I guess the reason why I was so interested in this topic was reading in the Bible where it says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I always thought, so what is wisdom? Why does it start with that? But I think we're going to dive into the human perspective of wisdom first.
Yeah, we are.
Right.
Wisdom. So as we know, as we have grown up with, not everybody has grown up with an understanding of wisdom, but wisdom has been held in high esteem for millennia. And you take a look at all of these different cultures and the stories that they have and the mythologies that they have, and all of them are going to hold in high regard and in high esteem wisdom. Greek mythology, right?
Yeah,
do we have there?
There's a goddess Athena. She was actually the goddess of wisdom and warfare, but not just warfare, but it was more strategic warfare. So it was actually like the tactic behind fighting, behind conquering victory. And then we also kind of look in history, and not just in mythology, not just as a goddess, but wisdom was always kind of prized with people like Yaroslav the Great. And
Who was Yaroslav?
so he was actually
Great or the wise?
he was the wise.
Oh, the wise.
Yaroslav the wise. I don't know, but he was a grand prince of Kievan.
Sounds like a made-up title.
I'm telling you, it's really.
I am Mark the Wise too. You know what? I'm Mark the Wise.
Sound like a wise guy.
You wise guy, huh? Tony.
What did he do?
So actually, historians kind of find that his role was whenever Kievan Rus was like the most prosperous. So that's whenever he kind of brought back religion into to the Slavic culture. He kind of translated Greek manuscripts into Slavic languages. He opened tons of libraries, had tons of books written. He also extended the boundaries of the empire, kingdom, and at the end of his reign, his sons were fighting over the throne. So he actually established like an order, sort of like a lineage of successors, like who would follow. So people kind of regarded him as the wise.
Succession planning. He was wise.
Yeah.
We do that in business and finance nowadays.
Exactly, to avoid any kind of quarrels or any of that, especially with family. There was also Charles V of France. He doesn't necessarily have the title, the wise.
Good old Charlie.
Yeah, but Chuck. But he did have.
Hey,
Chuck the wise.
Chuck the Wise.
Yeah.
But he did kind of establish like a certain peace after the 100 Years' War in France. So that's why he was considered wise. So you kind of notice that a lot of these kind of historical figures or mythological figures kind of lined up wisdom with prosperity and peace, that they brought a calm rule over their people. And that's kind of what people, I guess, treasured and saw as wise during that time.
That's awesome.
It's kind of interesting, though.
I love how you point out that wisdom brought about prosperity. Like they go hand in hand, kind of, and that kind of ties, what we're discussing today, going into like biblical wisdom. We take a look at the book of Proverbs, and Proverbs is all about that. It talks about how wisdom, through the use of wisdom, you are able to bring prosperity into your life. You are able to have a good life, like that so many people aim for, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so many self-help books today are aimed for people achieving like this good life, like this successful life, that you go from nothing to becoming something, being a self-made person. And that's kind of like the wisdom of today's like modern world, is being able to help yourself through knowledge and through reading these books.
So my question is, what does the book of Proverbs define wisdom to be? Like we're taking a look at this, how wisdom brings about prosperity. But what does Proverbs say that wisdom is?
Mm-hmm.
What does Proverbs say?
What does Proverbs say?
What does the Bible say
Mark.
about wisdom? And obviously, we start with Proverbs, and it's not even just in Proverbs. It's also within Psalms and in Job.
So many books, actually. You take a look, and depending on which Judeo-Christian view you hold, or like how you're going to be, what you believe in, some people line up, they're going to say that these three books are going to be the books of wisdom. In another tradition, it's going to be like a different set of books, like 7 different books that are going to be wisdom. In like the Judeo, tradition, you're going to see some of these are going to fall into writings, not necessarily wisdom literature. But it's interesting, like how different traditions define these different books, but all of them have something to share with us. So Proverbs, that's the first one we're looking at.
And once again, not even just in Proverbs. It initially says it, in Psalm 11:10. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and all those who practice it have a good understanding. His praise endures forever." And then once again, it says it in Job. It says, "Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom." and to burn from evil that is understanding. And then in Proverbs, where it says in chapter 1, verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. And it's kind of, obviously this segues right into what we're going to be talking about. And, you know, we're thinking about wisdom, and it's like, where do we even begin? And the Bible immediately says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
I love it. But what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
What is wisdom?
What is wisdom? What is the fear of the Lord? What is knowledge? So much to unpack here.
All right, you take a look at Hebrew translation, wisdom in Proverbs. We're specifically diving in, and a great resource for you to look up, actually, the Bible Project. If you've never heard of it, I would highly recommend you dive in. They do some really great explaining. Like, it blew my mind, and they animate things pretty well. It's pretty awesome. But goes on to say, chokhmah, this word that we have, which is wisdom, we're taking a look at in Proverbs. It's saying that this is an attribute of God. It is, wisdom, chokhmah, walks the earth seeking, for somebody, and calling out in the streets for, come and buy my wares, come and take what I have to offer you, But chokhmah, it is an attribute of God. And we take a look at how in Proverbs it also goes to show that wisdom is a tool that we can use to create our life, just like an artisan would make, a wall with bricks, or like with a hammer. He would use that tool to build something, to craft something. Wisdom can also be used in our lives to craft something in our lives, success in work, success in, marriage and family and business, and all these different aspects. We're taking a look at Proverbs. Proverbs is full of advice and wise sayings, right? And things to guide us.
Yeah, that's why I love the book of Proverbs, because it just brings life into like such a positive aspect that you can do all this, like you can have this success in your life in any aspect as long as you focus on wisdom and with this like mysterious thing that you need to kind of chase after, kind of pursue.
I love it. You're all about the Proverbs, huh?
Oh, I love
Proverbs,
definitely.
with your jar of Proverbs.
No, definitely my favorite book of the Bible, like Psalm, Proverbs, definitely Proverbs. Like, I don't know. It's just like I try to read a chapter every day. It is, I don't know, it's just so good. You always receive something for yourself, always something to think about. Because even if you look at these sayings, there's always like a deeper meaning behind what it is, behind what is said in the book. Like there's always like ways that you can look at it from different perspectives, kind of find something new.
Yeah.
So that's why I love the complexity.
The
of Proverbs.
complexity.
And it shows the complexity of human life as well.
No, it's definitely interesting, even talking about different perspectives and how, oftentimes Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job kind of give these different perspectives. We see in Proverbs and how it gives the perspective, life is good, obviously, seeking wisdom, that is good. And then we dive into Ecclesiastes where it's like, okay, things aren't always in our control. And then it wraps it up pretty decently, wraps up perfectly with Job, where it's like, at the end of the day, who are we to question God and whom has all the control, Yeah. And once again, it's so easy for us to focus on ourselves as humans and how easy it is to put ourselves above on the pedestal. But who is the creator of this whole entire universe, Who is the most wise and who has created us? And it's God. And that's why the fear of the Lord, this reverence for God, this seriousness that we should have for God, is the beginning of wisdom.
So it's almost like wisdom is like this lifestyle. It's like the way you live your life, like whether you live it in the pursuit of God, of keeping like the commandments that God has set out. And by following these instructions, like through these little sayings, these little proverbs that kind of tell you, like kind of open up, in life, if a person offends you, or if you do this, or you think about extending the boundary, like don't do it. And it kind of shows you like it's like a way of right living, right standing before God.
I love it.
I love it.
So good standing with God. Wisdom is a way of life. I love how you said that. It's an attribute of God, but it is a way for us to live our lives. And Proverbs has been guiding us and telling us that, if you live your life according to wisdom, if you use wisdom to shape your life, then all will go well with you, right? Yeah. According to Proverbs, yeah?
According to Proverbs.
According to Proverbs. You got a smirk on your face. I'm thinking there's a little bit more to the story, though.
No, it's even digging into that specifically in Proverbs and saying that those who are seeking wisdom and counsel, everything will, things will go well. And then those who hate knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord would have none of my counsel, which is wisdom. And therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way and have their own desires. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster.
So it looks like there's two kinds of people there that you're defining right there. Those who value wisdom and a specific type of wisdom, the godly wisdom, and versus those who don't, which,
Hey, that's a
ties
thing.
right in. It's a thing, yeah? Why I brought the safe, So what do we typically put into a safe? We're going to put our most valued possessions, like we're going to put money, we're going to put gold, jewels, silver, whatever.
Things that we don't want other people touching or things that we don't want, people stealing because we treasure it.
Exactly.
We treasure it.
We treasure it. And then we take a look at Proverbs, two places that I want to put. Proverbs 8:11, and it says, wisdom is better than jewels. All you desire cannot compare with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then Proverbs 16:16, how much better to get wisdom than gold? To get understanding is to be chosen rather than silver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's almost like nothing in this world can ever compare to the lifestyle that wisdom brings. The riches and honor, the good reputation that comes along with it. It's not necessarily about this materialistic things that people tend to strive towards, like these jewels, these rubies, things that we count as precious in our humanly wisdom, but rather striving for more in our day-to-day life.
How much do people value wisdom?
How much do people value wisdom?
That brings me to another Norse, actually going to mythology,
back into it.
Like all these cultures hold wisdom in high regard. Now, according to Norse mythology, there is a god of wisdom called Odin, and he is shown as this figure who is a wanderer. He is a traveler, and he's going across like all the worlds and searching to know it all. He's like has this thirst for wisdom, and there's this one story which stands out like in his, mythology. He goes and in order to gain wisdom, he had to sacrifice one of his eyes in order to receive like this all-knowing wisdom, to be known as the god of wisdom. Wow. And he gives it up. And that's the price that he paid. That's how much he valued wisdom.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever give up an eye
for
that. Like, I'm glad I can read Proverbs.
But no eyeballs for wisdom.
No eyeballs, no hands, no... you don't value wisdom?
Yeah. No, obviously there are those who...
I pick my battles.
You pick your battles.
You pick your battles. There are those who value wisdom, higher than others.
That's an interesting thing that we point out here. Why do some people value wisdom more than others do? And like, what kind of wisdom are we talking about here? Obviously, if you were raised in, as a Christian, you've been told your whole life that, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and, lay up treasures for yourself, seek wisdom above riches, above gold, above silver, right? Above more precious than rubies. But what if you were not raised in that? Like, do you esteem wisdom as highly? Do people esteem wisdom?
Do people esteem wisdom?
I feel like people might esteem like the fruits of wisdom that are written about, like success, having a good life, having this safety, this prosperity. I think that people treasure that, but they don't necessarily maybe go back to the source, which is wisdom, or understand it in a different way.
So like that attribute of God that we were saying, wisdom is the attribute of God, and it's still tying everything back to Him, who is the source, right?
Yeah.
And so we're saying that some people will try to have the attribute without
without God.
without the creator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that what we get today when we take a look at like all the self-help books and everything else that we have out there? People are still striving for something, searching for something,
Mm-hmm.
looking for something,
Yeah, fulfillment,
fulfillment in,
purpose.
which I think brings us, it's a great segue into the next book that we want to dive into.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
Yes, Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes.
So actually, to introduce, it's interesting to see how we jump from such a positive, uplifting book that is Proverbs. And then, you come into Ecclesiastes, and like one of the first verses that you read in this chapter is, I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. Yet better than both is he who has not been born and has not seen the evil deeds done under the sun. So it already takes on this like depressive tone, and you're thinking, Solomon, like, who hurt you? Like, why
Yeah.
are you so, like, there's no joy, there's no life. It's like,
So even just digging into, it's so funny. Like even just digging into Ecclesiastes, and it says the words of the preacher, or Koheleth, somebody who speaks out to a crowd, or the preacher. There is in Ecclesiastes, there is one who is speaking, and then one who is writing it down. The author, we have we have yet to know, like, truly.
So we have two people.
We have two people, and even with the person who is speaking, they label it as Koheleth, which we just automatically, well, some say that it could be a descendant of David. It's generally assumed that it is Solomon, because it is the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, and we know that Solomon is a descendant of David, and
he was known to be as the wisest.
and he was known to be the wisest, which is interesting because in Proverbs he's telling us all these fantastic things of wisdom, and then in Ecclesiastes he's then saying, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And in verse 16, I have said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who are over Jerusalem before me. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this is also but a striving after wind.
So almost
And
meaningless.
almost-
like he's saying
Yeah, and it's like,
in some
it's-
translations.
yeah, in some translations, in which we'll get into that real quick here in a bit. But regardless, it goes from Proverbs, where he's saying that wisdom
End
is
all
the
be
key,
all. Yeah.
end all be all. And in Ecclesiastes, he's like, I perceive that this is all but a striving after wind.
Yeah.
It takes like a completely different, like a 180 turn right there, and he's telling us all that he told us in Proverbs. He's like, actually, you know what? According to Ecclesiastes here, according to this teacher, everything is vanity, everything is dust. There's a great word actually when we translate, hevel, that is used. And the word hevel actually means vapor. Now, like a lot of
From Hebrew,
translations,
right?
a lot of translations are translating it into English as meaningless.
Which is not,
It's not. He's
it's
not
there,
saying,
but it's not quite there of what he's
it's
trying to
not
fully express.
like getting to that
It's
meaning.
a beautiful metaphor, though.
It
Yeah.
is.
He's saying that like this is a vapor. All of this you're chasing after it, but like hevel is a vapor. It's there. It's beautiful to look at, but like you try to grasp it, you can't. It's not something solid, and it changes. And
Yeah.
it's gone.
I love how, like, even in the
unpredictable.
Bible Project, which you guys have already seen, they described hevel once again as this vapor, but also in the sense that vapor seems to take some kind of form. You're like, oh, okay, this is taking some kind of form. You try to grasp it, it goes right between your fingers. And once again, going to hevel, and he's saying that this is also, all this wisdom is just a striving after the wind.
So why does he like take this dual perspective here in Ecclesiastes? Like why does he have this teacher and then like the author? Like what's he doing there?
What is he doing there?
Yeah, I feel like the first person, like the teacher, is kind of just like breaking you down. He's kind of discouraging you about life, that there is no purpose. Life is hevel, but it also, I think you mentioned that he said, I sought out the wisdom of man, the wisdom of mankind, and it is foolishness, it is
Yeah.
folly.
So
So it's
he's
almost wisdom without God.
So he's seeking to like flip your worldview completely upside down, turn everything that you have seen
Yeah.
and that you've understood so far to, well,
Mhm.
actually, you know nothing.
I love it because in a way, it gives you the things that like people are always thinking about, like, okay, you want to think of the views of this world, like here you go. This is what it's like. At the end of the day, 6 feet into the grave, you're not going to be able to bring all the stuff that you're toiling under the sun. There's only, wait a second, the sunglasses. And he literally puts you into the perspective of this under the sun mentality, where it's like the things of this world, the things that we try and strive so much for on this earth, like at the end of the day, there's a time for everything. There's a time for to be born and a time to die. And within 100 years, nobody's going to be really even remembering your name.
The world was here long before we were on it, and nobody remembers those that were here, and those that are here today will not be remembered by those who will come after.
Exactly.
Yeah, he goes to say, man. So, like, is he contradicting himself here? Because, like, he says one thing in Proverbs. He's saying, like, if you live according to wisdom, if you live according to the fear of the Lord, you are going to add, prosperity to yourself. You're going to do well in marriage and all these other things. Ecclesiastes, he's saying that, actually, it's not that simple. Is like, what's he?
So, I mean, that's why a lot of scholars brings up the book of Ecclesiastes because of its contradictory nature. And although it is contradictory, like he's still bringing us under the sun mentality and the things of this world. And then all throughout Ecclesiastes, he puts us in this perspective. But then the author brings it back down at the very end, and he's saying, besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge and going into fearing God. And all these things, although it's, wisdom and seeking this out under the sun, although it's meaningless, we still need to have this fear of the Lord and remembering our Creator with everything. Yeah.
So life in its own is kind of meaningless because whenever we die, it's our spirit that lives on. It's our spirit that rejoins with God. And so whatever we plant in our life towards eternity is what's going to count. But kind of what people try to strive for in success here, building a life here, it's all going to fade away. It's not going to matter. And I think that is kind of what he's alluding to. That in the end, everything you're trying to build here is it's smoke. It's gonna disappear. You think it's so important right now because you're just caught in the midst of it, but in reality, it's not gonna matter in the future.
That's one perspective there, but then like what I think he's actually getting at here is that Proverbs was more simplistic, right?
Yeah.
You like 1 + 1 = 2. He's giving us like a set almost formula that like, hey, you follow.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, you follow the law, you do things well, you strive, like you fear God, and you will have prosperity. But then Ecclesiastes is going to say that, well, it's not that simple. Actually, like not always are the righteous rewarded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what's that place in Scripture? Do you have it?
For what specifically?
Where he's talking about, like how the righteous are meet their end and like how they die, and those who are the wicked, they have their days prolonged.
Oh, yes. I think
it's chapter 7.
Ecclesiastes
you have that?
7, yeah.
So in my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing. Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? And be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you do before your time? Yeah, and it is good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand, for the one who fears God shall come out from both of them.
Man, that's interesting.
Yeah, really quickly going from all the things that we're reading in Proverbs to this.
It's not that simple because sometimes, and you do see this, like that's the way that life goes, and that's what the perspective the author and the teacher are trying to give to us here, that you could live your whole life according to, these laws. You can do everything well, and you could still
Life is unpredictable.
Yeah, life is unpredictable. It is like that vapor. You think it's forming in one shape, and you've done A + B, you're going to expect to get C, but suddenly, like, you get a whole different thing. you've been living righteously and you are punished for it, like every step of the way. Your children are against you, or like your business fails, everything is just gone, and the wicked are going to be like rewarded. Oftentimes we see this too, people who are evading their taxes, right? We're thinking, man, here we are paying our taxes and things like that, we are law-abiding citizens, and like we get hit with these things, like we bear the brunt of everything of society. There are those who are hiding things in their corporations and so forth, like in shell corporations and things. They get away with murder almost. And it's like, how is that even?
It brings it back into like the simplicity that sometimes, good things happen to good people, or bad things happen to good people, and then good things happen to bad people. And it's like, what exactly is going on here?
So is he saying that like this is all vanity, this is all dust? So like you shouldn't like live according to Proverbs?
No, not necessarily. And even just within Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 14, that, even whenever things don't go our way, in the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider, God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. So, like, despite the things that might go against us, we should still be trusting God above everything else in the day of prosperity and the day of adversity as well.
Like he ends off, so he does end off Proverbs there. Sorry, not Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Yeah. He ends it off, and like you said, the teacher has turned your worldview upside down, but the author finishes it off, and he's saying that, although life is not as simple as Proverbs may make it out to be, although that there may be challenges, although, you may face adversity, all of these things are good, and you should, with gladness, receive both prosperity and adversity.
And he mentions it's all gifts from the Lord.
All gifts from the Lord, yeah. That's interesting. So, like, he's teaching us to take life with an open hand, kind of, expect that the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away, right? As foreshadowing into our next book. But that perspective, he's still nodding to Proverbs like, okay, this is right. Even so, even though things may not go the way that you expect them to, this is still the way to live. Because at the end of time, we will all face judgment, as he says. We all will face judgment. Everything comes under
And no matter
judgment.
how much we try, how much we strive, at the end of the day, things aren't in our control. We can't change what will happen tomorrow or for somebody else, but through it all, to always be trusting God in the day of prosperity and the day of adversity.
And what we can control is if we're keeping God's commandments, like he says in the end. Fearing God, keeping his commandments, and remembering that in your youth.
Yeah,
true.
I love it.
So even though we might not be able to control life's unpredictability, what we can control is the way that we behave, the way that we act.
We behave the way that we act. And at the end of the day, it's
that sounds kind of redundant.
Yeah, but like at the end of the day, it depends on our once again our fear of the Lord, this reverence that we have for God. Although some might say like, hey, like I wasn't born with wisdom, like how can I be this wise old man or whatever? But the Bible specifically says in Proverbs chapter 2 that if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as treasures, like you brought your vault. If you seek it like silver and search for it as hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. And then it says at the very end, so you will walk in the way of the good and keep to the paths of righteous. For the upright will inhabit the land, and those with integrity will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the treasures will be rooted out of it. So at the end of the day, what we can control is our willingness to come to the fear of the Lord, our reverence to God, and then if we're seeking this out, then he will open it up, and then we will begin to have this understanding of the fear of the Lord, and then God will give us wisdom.
Yeah. And if we look at Job's life, we can see that in the beginning we see that Job was he was a man, he was considered rich for his timing. He was a very prosperous, and I think it even mentions that he was the richest man like during his time.
Diving
he
right in,
had-
huh?
He had
Yeah.
livestock.
Let's do it.
Let's
Let's
go.
do it. Come on.
and it's-
So, once again, in the day of prosperity, you know,
and in the day of adversity.
and in the day of adversity,
Who is the perfect example? Job.
Job.
Job. So we dive right in and we see who is Job. Job, as Leo has already started to mention, was this character that we see in the Bible who was alive. And he was a rich, a prosperous man. And you could say that he was a righteous man. Would you say so?
Because it does mention that he would bring offerings to God for the sins of his children, for his family.
To make sure that they were in right standing with God.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he was a person that already had the fear of the Lord, you could say, right? And like he was already living righteously. And we see God gathers his counsel, right? And he says, look upon my servant Job. He's essentially like, it's kind of like a jeweler, you know, he's closing up shop and a thief comes in and he's like, oh, hey, I'm here to steal from you. And he's like, oh, have you seen this jewel right here? Let's see
Yeah.
if you could steal it. This council gathers, and we see that there comes into this heavenly realm the Satan.
The Satan. The
So
Satan.
one who is
Opposed.
opposed, yeah, as it defines. One who is opposed comes and he says, you know what? Hey, well, of course, like he's going to be your good servant. Of course, he's going to be, you know, like bringing these offerings and everything to you because you have prospered his hand. So like he's figured out the formula to life, you know, like press 1, press 2, and you'll get outcome 3, you know, A plus B equals C. And then he's saying, like, if you allow me to take everything from him, if you allow, you know, something bad to happen, you will see he's going to curse you. And we see that the story develops. The Lord says to him, yeah, go, okay, just do not harm him. So what happens?
Goes.
He goes. He takes away all of his sons and daughters. He takes away his livestock, his servants,
Yeah.
everything.
Can you imagine that? Like, to obviously, you know, there's this whole gathering, and then God, he points to Job. He's like looking at Job. He's like, have you considered my servant Job? Like, can you imagine that? You know, obviously he picks Job because of his just reverence for God, because, you know, he trusts in God and within everything. Can you imagine that, like, even today, where it's like God's like, you know, have you considered my servant Vily, or have you considered my servant Liya? And how, like, having that reverence for God, you know, out of all the people, God's like, have you considered this guy right here? And obviously opening up for Job, have you considered my servant Job? And that's because Job lived through the way of the Lord.
So we see what happens to him. Like, he was living Proverbs for, like, the first half of chapter 1, and then suddenly Ecclesiastes hits Job. Yeah. So God points this out, and what happens? Like, everything is taken away. Complete devastation, complete despair comes upon Job, you know? And still, you know, like, even though all his
Publications.
God bless you. Possessions,
Whoa.
pop filters,
Pop filters.
possessions are taken away. He still does not I'm having a difficult
He still
time
does not
today.
curse God.
Does not curse God.
Yeah.
Even though his wife tells him to do so at a certain point in time, you know, because like further on we see that the test even goes greater. The test goes even deeper because
deeper
the
and
Satan
deeper.
goes, he's like, okay, well, let's strike his health now.
Yeah.
He still hasn't cursed, but like, okay,
Yeah.
let's watch.
Starts off with his property and children, then he
Yeah.
starts to attack with his health.
And so we see, like, as the story develops, he's now sitting in the ashes. He's like scraping himself with a shard of pottery.
No,
like,
yeah, he's lamenting
oh
his birth.
man,
He did. He cursed
Yeah.
the day of his birth.
Yeah.
Very Ecclesiastes.
very Ecclesiastes. It's better to be not even born.
Let the day
Yeah, but to see
perish
the
on
evil
which,
done unto his
Job
son.
3, verse 3, let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it.
Got chills.
So, absolutely, I mean, he's absolutely destroyed it this, with, you know, with himself and with a lot of different things. But yet,
He does not curse God. And his friends come, right?
mm-hmm.
And they're coming and pointing
Dig into
out,
some-
like, hey, listen,
we
you
did.
probably have like some deep-rooted sin right here. You did something bad
for
to
a whole
have
Yeah.
God like come and
There's a whole
take
bunch of
everything
Hebrew
away.
poetry that they really just
Yeah,
dissect
deep.
into Job's life.
deep Hebrew poetry.
Very deep.
Like as you're reading through it, it's very dense, but
Just
like
so dense.
it's beautiful. And this conversation goes on for chapters on chapters. And so we think initially that Job is taking this well, right?
Yeah. Actually,
Like-
whenever I first read these chapters with his friends, I thought, man, his friends are actually saying some pretty wise things. Like this could be like what they're saying is actually like quite nice. Like I would want friends like this to like help me out, point stuff out, even though sometimes they do kind of bring him down. But whenever I first read it, I was like, I don't see like what are they saying that's so wrong? Because I think I was looking at it from like the human wisdom, the human perspective. Like what they were saying was they were trying to help out. Maybe there is this hidden fault that you have, this sin that you have not
Karma.
confessed. You know? And you would think that what they are saying is right, but it's not.
Yeah. Well, later on we go to see that like when God answers Job, and after all of this, his friends are rebuked actually, and they actually have to talk to Job. So Job offers a sacrifice for them in order for them to be made righteous.
Yeah.
Because like Job remained righteous through it all. But going back to like towards the beginning, how does he take it? He's taking it really well initially. God is still good. And yet he's going through this like roller coaster now where he's like thinking on one hand that God is good, and then the next he's down and he's saying, God, why? Like, why is this happening to me? He's questioning him and he's saying, God, answer me. And we see that towards the end of Job, God comes down. God actually talks to Job. God answers him. But it's nothing that you would expect.
He does, but then he doesn't.
Yeah. So he replies, but he doesn't give answer.
Yeah.
You could say. When he comes down, like in the storm, and he comes and faces Job, and he says to Job, hey, brace yourself like a man. You will answer me now.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely, yeah. Not in the way that we would expect him to.
No.
He doesn't explain,
you're not going to be like, well, Job, listen, because
this is why.
yesterday you tripped your neighbor's cow.
No, it's not necessarily
that.
it's not necessarily explicit.
Not
He doesn't,
even- yeah.
doesn't describe
doesn't-
it like, hey, this is a testing for you, but boom, he just shows
just
him these
completely
things.
questions Job, and he starts to ask him this, like, okay, do you understand? Who are you, to question me? He's kind of putting Job in his
Yeah.
place. He's saying,
Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me that you may be in the right? Have you an arm like God, and can you thunder with a voice like his? Adorn yourself with majesty. Basically just showing him behemoth and like all these,
he's going to the very foundations of time. He's like, were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth? Were you there when I placed the stars, hung them in the skies? Were you there when I made the constellations, the sun, the moon, when I made the tides on the earth, and how, the turtles and everything else goes on, goes on to say how all of these systems, he's in control of all of this, and he was there from the very beginning and prior to the beginning, and he's saying that he knows this intimately. He is intimate with all of this, and he's asking Job what do you know? Who are you to question?
The one who's created, the behemoth, the Leviathan, and all these great things.
And what do we see Job do?
Yeah.
I shut my mouth, he says. He's like, you're right, in all of this, I cannot begin to fathom. My wisdom is nowhere compared to yours. My wisdom is foolishness compared to, the wisdom of God. And what's so interesting is, at the end of his life, after all of this goes on, God blesses Job. And we don't know,
Restores his good fortunes.
Sevenfold, actually. He has sons and daughters again. He has all the servants. He has, the fields, the sheep,
Livestock.
all the livestock. Everything is restored to him, multiplied. And this isn't because he passed the test. God, in his good wisdom, decided that, you know what? I'm going to give Job a gift.
Yeah.
It's not because he passed a test.
Yeah. After all these things that God showed him, Job is still wow. He just like absolutely silences himself. And then in chapter 42, he says, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted.
And he lives out the rest of his life as this wise man that like is weathered, by experience.
Yeah.
He went through this like huge thing of loss, of devastation, of despair.
Yeah.
And he has learned from it now, like no matter what comes, no matter what happens, whether it be good, whether it be bad, going back to Ecclesiastes, the day of adversity as well as the day of prosperity.
Yeah.
Those two, God has made them both equal.
Yeah.
But like he's addressing, what's our attitude towards it? How are we living our lives? Like what are we still going to have joy? Are we still able to live our life, according to that fear of the Lord, like Job had and like Job ends up with?
It's easier said than done.
It is.
Obviously a lot of times we want to have this wisdom in times of adversity and going through these different things. But then like once we actually start to have our waters tested and all these different things, going through a certain trial, then it's like, oh man, like what's happening now? And then we don't run to God, And I just love the book of Job and how he definitely saw both Proverbs. It was definitely more like Proverbs and having a day of prosperity, and then Ecclesiastes, and going through a day of adversity as well. And
It's
yeah,
a combination of the two.
Yeah, beautifully tied up.
Yeah.
and then God at the end of Job brings himself and is saying, who are you to question me, And we talk about all this wisdom and think about just how much wisdom our God has.
Mm-hmm.
And, even in Romans chapter 11, verse 33, where it says, in Romans chapter 11, verse 33, it says, oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God, and how inscrutable are his ways. His infinite knowledge is something that, we will never truly grasp. And it's so, we're still here on this earth and we're so confined within, our understanding of God, our understanding of wisdom. But then, Paul is writing in Romans chapter 11, verse 33, he's saying, oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. And notice, and this is also from a sermon by John Piper, where he's saying, Paul could have written, the heights or, this or that, but he decides to write specifically, even just this keyword, oh, like to bring the absolute reverence, like the absolute depth, like, God's riches and wisdom and understanding is deep. Mm-hmm. It's very deep. And once again, even in our, we're so wise in our vast understanding, which at the end of the day, like, it's great and all, but we barely even scratch the surface of God.
We think we have it all figured out.
We think
only to realize that we really don't.
That we really don't.
No. That
we really don't. And it's crazy to see, God open up to Job and absolutely lay out all these different things. And how much more, the wisdom of God will become known to us even after this life and extend past eternity. Like, right now we can only know so much. And then obviously when we die, we send it to heaven. And there we'll continuously learn more and more about God.
We
and
only
the wisdom
the
of
surface here, and not even the surface.
And I just love it because it's like God shows his wisdom in everything to do, like everything that we see, like the wisdom that he has in even creating us. All these different things that we see around us. He's a wise creator, and it's just awesome. And I just love the word oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God.
He's stuck on oh.
Yeah.
No, I know, but
it shows fascination.
Mm-hmm.
It does show fascination.
Yeah. No, honestly.
And it's something that we need to have in our lives. Once again, going back into the fear of the Lord.
Fascination, the reverence.
The reverence.
Yeah. Don't be flippant with the holy, with the sacred. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the end, true wisdom, it is like this, as we talked about, like this right standing before God. that no matter what life brings us, no matter how unpredictable, whether we do good and expect something good to come out of it, but instead it's not what we imagined, that we continue to honor God, we continue to seek him, and that is like what will come. It's like wisdom.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah, no, definitely. No matter whether you are handed good or whether you are handed bad from the human perspective, your attitude towards it.
Yeah.
If you still revere God, if you have that fear of God, all will go well with you. Maybe not from the way that we understand it or the way that we want it to be. Success, prosperity, and all these things multiplied to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what we value more is God himself. What we value more is having him. That we will not lose.
Yeah. And obviously, I know, like, this is wrapping up pretty nicely, but also at the end of the day, to not be wise in our own eyes, you know, which we may have already touched on, but at the end of the day, like, not to put ourselves on the pedestal. And in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 7, it says, "Be not wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord, and turn away from evil." And at the end of the day, blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding.
Yeah. So, blessed is the one who finds wisdom, gains understanding. And it all starts with the fear of the Lord.
This reverence for God.
Reverence.
To keeping his commandments.
So we encourage you. Look for wisdom. Seek it as if it were gold, because it's more precious than gold and fine jewels. Seek that wisdom. Seek the fear of the Lord, and you will have found it. I can't say prosperity, but you will have it.
Something.
You will have it. No, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. But
Yeah. Well, it's been an honor, Liya, having you on the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm by no means an expert, but I did enjoy.
Neither are we, but we have a
this-
podcast.
this discussion. But yeah, I did learn a lot. So
That's good.
I'm your host, Vily Semenenko,
And I'm your host, Mark Schlahovsky.
and our guest, Liya,
Liya Semenenko.
Thank you for tuning in.
and signing off.
Signing off. That was good, Nick.
You think about to die?
Oh, for real?